There will come a moment in your life, a moment when the air in the room feels heavier and time slows down. You'll feel your heartbeat in your throat. Your skin will burn, not from fire but from the silent judgment of a crowd. You've just been humiliated. Maybe it was a cruel joke at your expense. Maybe someone twisted your words, mocked your intelligence, or exposed a weakness you thought no one knew. Laughter erupts, eyes lock onto you. You're no longer a person, you're a spectacle. And in that moment, you will feel something primal rising in you. The urge to defend, to lash out, to make them feel the same pain they just inflicted on you. But deep inside, another voice will whisper, "What do I do now?" Most men crumble in that moment. They react impulsively, driven by emotion, and in doing so, they hand over their power. They let others control their fate. But what if I told you that there's another way? What if you could turn this humiliation into your greatest strength? What if, instead of being a victim of public disgrace, you became untouchable? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, wisdom seekers. This is not just another video. This is a blueprint for handling one of life's most brutal tests, public humiliation. And we will not face it as weak men, but as warriors, as Stoics, as men who refuse to be broken. For centuries, the wisest minds have studied the art of maintaining power in the face of shame. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They all understood that true strength is not about avoiding humiliation, but mastering your reaction to it. Because the truth is this: no one can humiliate you unless you allow it. Today I will give you 6 things. Unshakable principles that will make you immune to public disgrace. If you master these, not only will you never fear humiliation again, but you will walk through life with an aura of strength that no one can break. Listen carefully, because these lessons are not just theories. They are weapons. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Every like, subscribe helps us continue our mission of sharing knowledge. And leave a comment below and share your opinion on these strategies, or tell me which one resonates with you the most. Ready to unlock more wisdom? Let's get started. Thing 1. The art of silence. Becoming unbreakable in the face of humiliation. There is a kind of strength that few men possess. It is not the strength of the body, nor the strength of a sharp tongue. It is something far rarer, far more difficult to master. It is the strength of silence. Picture this. You're standing in a room full of people. The words of humiliation have already been spoken. Maybe it was an insult, a cutting remark, a joke at your expense. The crowd watches, waiting, expecting a reaction. Some are amused, others are indifferent. A few might feel sorry for you. And then, nothing. You do not flinch, you do not react. You do not give them what they crave. An emotional outburst, a stammered defense, an attempt to reclaim your dignity with words. Instead, you remain silent. That silence is power. Most men believe that strength lies in the ability to fire back, to crush their opponent with words or force. But true strength is in self-control. The moment you react emotionally, you are no longer in control. You are dancing to the tune of your enemies. They pull the strings and you perform. But silence? Silence is defiance. Silence is dominance. Silence is the weapon that turns humiliation back on the one who delivered it. Consider the wisdom of the Stoics. Epictetus once said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but simply say, 'He does not know my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" This is not just a clever remark. It is a revelation. The moment you defend yourself against an insult, you acknowledge its power over you. You validate it. But when you do nothing, when you meet humiliation with the quiet confidence of a man who is unshaken, you strip the insult of its power. You make it meaningless. Imagine 2 warriors facing each other on a battlefield. One raises his sword, shouting, daring the other to fight. But the second warrior does not move. He stands, calm, his eyes steady. He does not draw his weapon, he does not speak. And slowly, the first warrior realizes something terrifying. He cannot provoke the man before him. That is what silence does. It unsettles those who seek to humiliate you because they expect resistance. They expect a show. They expect you to either crumble or lash out. But when you do neither, when you remain still, when you look at them as if they are nothing, as if their words have no more weight than the wind, they are the ones who feel small. They are the ones who begin to fumble, to feel the weight of their own weakness. This does not mean silence is passive. It is not cowardice. It is not submission. Silence is a conscious choice, a strategy, a statement of dominance. It is saying without words, "You are not worth my reaction." Think of Marcus Aurelius, the great philosopher king. As emperor of Rome, he faced constant slander. Jealous men sought to tear him down, spread rumors, mock his wisdom, and yet he rarely defended himself. He understood that truth does not require an argument. He knew that the opinions of lesser men did not diminish his worth. And so he remained silent, and in doing so, he remained untouchable. Now ask yourself, the last time someone humiliated you, how did you react? Did you rush to defend yourself? Did you try to argue your way out? Did you lash out in anger, proving that their words had power over you? Or did you remain still, unbothered, watching as the moment passed like a storm that could not shake the mountain? This is not easy. Silence takes discipline. It requires a mind trained in restraint, a heart hardened by wisdom. But once you master it, you will never be the same. You will begin to notice something fascinating. People will respect you more. They will sense something different about you. A quiet strength. A man who is not easily moved. Your enemies will hesitate before speaking your name. They will second-guess their attacks, wondering if you even care. And those who once sought to humiliate you will feel their own words bounce back at them, empty and powerless. Because here is the final truth. Humiliation only exists if you accept it. If you refuse to give it weight, it ceases to be real. It becomes nothing more than noise lost in the wind. And so when the moment comes, when they try to break you with words, with laughter, with public disgrace, do not fight back. Do not explain. Do not beg for understanding. Simply be silent. And watch as the world struggles to understand how a man can be so unshakable. Now let's move to the next thing, the next weapon you must master. If silence is your shield, then this is your sword. Thing 2, the unyielding frame, becoming the man who cannot be shaken. There is something about certain men, an aura, a presence, that makes them untouchable. They are not the loudest in the room. They do not seek attention. And yet, when they enter a space, people notice. Not because they demand it, but because their very existence commands it. This is the power of an unyielding frame. A psychological fortress that no insult, no mockery, no humiliation can penetrate. If silence is the first weapon against humiliation, then your frame is the armor that ensures no attack ever lands. Because understand this, humiliation does not come from the words of others, it comes from your reaction to those words. And your reaction is dictated by the strength of your frame. What is a frame? Your frame is your perception of reality. It is the set of beliefs, standards, and principles that shape how you interpret the world. Every man has one, but only a few have an unyielding frame. Most men allow their frame to be dictated by others, by social pressure, by the opinions of strangers, by the fear of judgment. These men are weak, not because they lack strength, but because their sense of self is fragile. They are leaves blown by the wind, bending to whatever forces push against them. But the man with an unshakable frame, he is a mountain. He does not bend. He does not shift to accommodate the expectations of the weak. He imposes his own reality on the world, and in doing so, he makes himself immune to humiliation. Imagine this. You're in a public space. A man, maybe a so-called friend, maybe a stranger, tries to humiliate you. He mocks you in front of others, makes a cruel joke, questions your intelligence, your strength, your worth. The weak man immediately enters the frame of his attacker. He plays the game. He tries to defend himself, to explain why the insult is unfair, to prove that he is not what they say he is. But the unshakable man? He does not acknowledge the insult. He does not accept the frame being imposed upon him. Instead, he holds his own frame, his own reality, so firmly that no words can alter it. This is not arrogance. It is not delusion. It is mastery of self-perception. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The moment you believe an insult, the moment you take it personally, you have given it life. You have made it real. But if you refuse to let it take root in your mind, it withers and dies before it even reaches you. Think of the strongest men in history, those who walked into rooms with unbreakable confidence, who were mocked, ridiculed, and yet remained unmoved. What made them different? It was not that they never faced humiliation. It was that they refused to accept it. Consider the Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius. He ruled Rome, yet he was constantly surrounded by backstabbers, traitors, and men who sought to undermine him. They whispered behind his back. They mocked his love for philosophy, calling him weak, impractical. And yet, in his writings, he never once showed anger. He never defended himself. He knew who he was, and because of that, nothing could shake him. Now imagine how this applies to your own life. Perhaps someone calls you weak. If you believe them, you are weak. But if you know, deep in your core, that you are strong, if you have trained your body, disciplined your mind, forged your character through hardship, then their words mean nothing. They are lies, and a lie only has power if you entertain it. Perhaps someone calls you stupid. If you react with anger, if you scramble to prove your intelligence, you have already lost. But if you know that you are capable, that you have mastered your craft, that you are always learning, then their words bounce off of you like arrows against steel. The key to an unshakable frame is this: your sense of self must come from within, not from external validation. Most men crumble under humiliation because they rely on the opinions of others for their self-worth. They seek approval, they fear rejection, they want to be seen as strong, intelligent, respected. But the moment you need validation from others, you have already given them control over you. A true Stoic, a true warrior, a true master of himself, needs nothing from anyone. His validation comes from within. His confidence is self-generated. His frame is his own, and no one can shake it. So how do you develop this? First, eliminate all need for external approval. This is not easy. It requires brutal self-reflection. Ask yourself, why do I care what people think of me? Dig deep. You will find that most of your fears, fear of humiliation, fear of rejection, fear of looking weak, come from a desperate need to be liked. You must kill this need. No one's opinion of you matters more than your own. Second, define yourself on your own terms. Decide who you are, not who society says you should be, not who your friends expect you to be, who you choose to be. And once you define that, commit to it completely. Third, practice indifference. When someone insults you, do nothing. Do not flinch. Do not explain. Do not seek to correct them. Let them speak, and let their words die in the air, unheard, unnoticed, irrelevant. Finally, reinforce your frame with action. If you believe yourself to be strong, train your body to prove it. If you believe yourself to be wise, study relentlessly. If you believe yourself to be unshakable, face adversity head-on until it no longer scares you. Humiliation can only exist if you allow it to penetrate your mind. But when your frame is iron, when you refuse to be moved, when you refuse to let their words define you, you become something rare. You become a man who is truly free. And a free man is a dangerous man. Now that you understand the power of an unshakable frame, it's time to move to the next thing. The next weapon in your arsenal. Because while silence is your shield and your frame is your armor, there's one more element that can turn humiliation into an advantage. And once you master it, you will not just survive moments of disgrace, you will dominate them. Thing 3. The power of amused mastery, turning humiliation into your weapon. There is a secret that only the most powerful men understand. A technique so subtle, so effective, that it not only neutralizes humiliation, but turns it into an advantage. It is not brute force. It is not aggression. It is something far more dangerous. It is amused mastery, the ability to take an insult, a moment of public disgrace, and twist it into your own power. Imagine a scenario. You are in a group setting. Someone attempts to humiliate you. Maybe they mock your intelligence, your appearance, your status. They say it loudly, making sure others hear, expecting you to react with embarrassment, anger, or submission. But instead of flinching, instead of getting defensive, instead of trying to explain yourself, you smile. A small, knowing smirk. Not a forced grin. Not an awkward laugh. But the expression of a man who sees the joke for what it is. Weak, insignificant, beneath him. And just like that, you have shifted the power dynamic. Because when you react with amused mastery, you do something remarkable. First, you show that you are untouchable. A man who is insulted and laughs does not look weak. He looks in control. He looks as if the attack was never a threat to begin with. Like a king watching a jester attempt to mock him, mildly entertained, but ultimately unimpressed. Second, you turn the humiliation back onto the one who delivered it. Most people who attempt to embarrass others do so for one reason: to assert dominance. They are trying to climb higher by pushing you down. But when you don't react the way they expect, when you don't get angry, when you don't shrink away, they lose their power in an instant. A man who mocks another and is met with cold indifference starts to feel foolish himself. And when he is met with amusement, he realizes something even worse. He was never a threat at all. Let's go deeper. Think about the greatest leaders in history. How many times do you think they were mocked? How many times did lesser men try to humiliate them, hoping to shake their confidence? Julius Caesar was ridiculed constantly. His enemies called him weak, too ambitious, too soft for Rome. But he never lashed out in anger. He laughed at their insults, brushed them off like dust, and continued conquering. He knew that responding with fury would give his enemies exactly what they wanted: an emotional reaction, a sign that their words had power. Instead, he used amused mastery, making it clear that he was above their petty attacks. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the greatest military minds in history, faced public ridicule. His height was often mocked, and people questioned his legitimacy as a leader. Did he engage in pointless arguments? Did he try to prove himself by responding to every insult? No. He allowed people to talk because he knew the truth. It didn't matter. His actions, his victories, his presence alone would speak louder than any insult ever could. And so the lesson is this: you must master the art of amusement. The next time someone insults you, take a deep breath. Feel the emotion rising, the instinct to defend yourself, to push back, to prove them wrong, and then let it go. Instead, smile. Let your eyes say, "That's the best you've got." Let your body language remain relaxed, almost bored. Show the world that this moment, this so-called humiliation, means nothing to you. This does not mean you become a clown, laughing at everything. No. Your amusement must be controlled, calculated, dripping with confidence. It is not the laughter of a weak man trying to fit in. It is the amusement of a king who finds the antics of lesser men mildly entertaining. Think of a lion. When a smaller animal growls at him, does he respond with anger? Does he rush to defend himself? No. He stares. Maybe he lets out a low, rumbling chuckle, but he does not engage because he knows he is above it, and so are you. This ability to meet humiliation with amusement does something even greater. It attracts people to you. Why? Because confidence is magnetic. A man who does not need to defend himself, who does not take himself too seriously, radiates power. People are drawn to those who do not seek validation, who are comfortable in their own skin. Have you ever noticed that the most charismatic men, the ones who seem to control every room they enter, rarely get flustered? Even when insulted, even when someone tries to mock them, they remain calm, amused, untouchable. And in doing so, they steal the attention, the energy, the frame of the room. This is the power of amused mastery. And here's the final, most important truth. When you master this, you are no longer afraid of humiliation, because it no longer exists for you. A man who cannot be embarrassed cannot be controlled. A man who can take an insult, flip it, and smile in the face of it becomes untouchable. From this moment forward, I want you to train yourself. When someone insults you, do not defend, do not explain, do not give them what they want. Instead, relax, smirk, tilt your head slightly as if to say, "That's cute," and watch as their confidence melts. Because humiliation is a weapon that only works if you let it. And now, you have learned to turn that weapon against those who wield it. Now that you understand how to use amused mastery, it's time to take things further. You have learned silence. You have learned the power of an unshakable frame. You have learned how to flip humiliation back onto your enemies. But there is something even more powerful, something that will make you truly unstoppable. It is time to talk about what separates the ordinary man from the elite. The next thing is not just a defense mechanism. It is a way to bend the world itself to your will. And when you master it, humiliation will no longer just be something you endure. It will be something you use to build your own legend. Thing 4. The art of control. Bending reality to your will. Power does not belong to the strongest. It does not belong to the loudest. It does not even belong to the most intelligent. Power belongs to the one who controls the frame of reality. Most men live as prisoners of perception. They accept the world as it is presented to them. When someone mocks them, they assume the humiliation is real. When someone laughs at them, they believe they are the joke. When someone challenges them, they instinctively react, as if they have no choice in the matter. But there is another type of man, a rare breed, a man who does not react, but instead reshapes the very nature of the moment itself. This man is a master of control. And when someone tries to humiliate him, he does not merely endure it, he bends the entire situation to his advantage. What does this mean? It means that humiliation only exists if you allow it to exist. It means that every moment is an opportunity to dictate reality on your terms. The weak man hears an insult and feels powerless. He believes the words carry weight. He accepts the frame of humiliation. The master, however, does not fight against the insult. He absorbs it, redirects it, and reshapes it into something else entirely. This is not denial. This is not wishful thinking. This is a higher form of strategy, one that the most powerful men in history have used to turn even the darkest moments into fuel for their rise. Let's step into the mind of a master. Imagine a room filled with people. You are standing in the center, and then it happens. Someone tries to humiliate you in front of everyone. Maybe they mock your intelligence. Maybe they attack your status. Maybe they bring up a personal failure, something they think will make you crumble. In that moment, you have absolute control, if you understand how to seize it. The ordinary man will react instinctively. His body will tense, his voice will rise in defense, he will play the game set by his enemy, and in doing so, he has already lost. But the master of control does something different. First, he does not react emotionally. His face remains calm, composed, unreadable. He allows a slight pause to settle into the room, letting the weight of the moment sit, allowing everyone to anticipate his response. This pause is powerful. It does something subtle but devastating. It shifts attention from the insult itself to how you will respond. And if you control the response, you control the entire situation. At this point, you have three paths, three ways to reshape the humiliation into power. The first path is playful dominance. You take the insult and own it in a way that makes the attacker look foolish for even trying. You act as if the joke was never at your expense, but instead an opportunity to display your effortless confidence. Picture this. Someone mocks you for a failure. Instead of defending yourself, you smirk and say, "Oh, that's nothing. You should have seen how badly I screwed up the first time I tried it." What happens? The crowd laughs with you instead of at you. The attempt at humiliation collapses because you never accepted the premise of the insult. Instead, you turned it into your own narrative. The second path is stoic indifference. You treat the insult as if it were beneath you, not even worthy of a reaction. A man mocks your intelligence? You simply look at him for a moment, give a slow nod, and return to what you were doing without saying a word. The effect is crushing. Why? Because it robs the attacker of the attention they seek. It makes them feel small, irrelevant, powerless. The insult does not land because you never let it take root. This is why the greatest leaders in history have mastered the art of silence in the face of provocation. They do not waste their energy on meaningless battles. They do not lower themselves to the level of fools. The third path is calculated redirection. This is the highest form of control. It requires intelligence, precision, and absolute confidence. Instead of reacting defensively, you flip the situation entirely, turning the moment against the attacker in a way they never expected. Someone mocks your ambition, you lean in and say, "I love that you think about me so much. I barely even think about you." Someone laughs at your failures, you smile and say, "Failures? Oh, those were just warm-ups. Watch what happens next." Instead of being defensive, you use the attack as an opportunity to reinforce your own power. You control the energy of the room, and in doing so, you make it impossible for anyone to truly humiliate you. This is what separates the strong from the weak. The weak man believes that words hold power over him. He believes that an insult is a fixed reality, something he must suffer through. The strong man knows the truth. Reality is fluid, and he is the one who shapes it. Once you master this, you will walk into any room with the knowledge that no one can shake you. A fool may try. A coward may lash out with petty words, but you are something else entirely. You are not a man who is humiliated. You are a man who uses every moment to his advantage. You are a man who bends the world to his will. Now, you have learned the power of silence. You have built an unshakable frame. You have mastered the art of amused dominance. And now, you have unlocked the highest level of control, the ability to dictate reality itself. But there is something even greater waiting for you. Because while controlling the frame is a weapon, there is one final thing that makes you truly invincible. A force so powerful that it does not just defend against humiliation, it transforms it into a stepping stone for absolute power. It is time to go deeper, to unlock the final layer of dominance. And once you master it, humiliation will never touch you again. Thing 5. Transcending the game, becoming untouchable through inner supremacy. There is a state of being so rare, so powerful, that only a handful of men in history have truly achieved it. A state where humiliation does not exist, not because you are defending against it, not because you are countering it, but because you have transcended the very game itself. Most men spend their lives reacting. They see themselves as chess pieces, moving only in response to the forces around them. When someone mocks them, they feel the need to reply. When someone attacks them, they feel the need to fight back. Their energy is spent in endless battles for validation, for approval, for recognition. But the supreme man, the man who has mastered himself, does not play this game. He does not feel the need to counter an insult. He does not feel the need to outmaneuver humiliation. He does not even acknowledge the existence of such things. Because he understands something that most men never do. Humiliation only exists for the man who seeks external validation. When a man truly, deeply understands his own value, when he knows that he is complete within himself, there is no insult, no laughter, no attack that can touch him. Imagine this. You are standing in a crowded hall. A man calls you a fool loudly for everyone to hear. A normal man will feel the instinct to prove that he is not a fool. He will argue, explain, react. A stronger man will deflect, counter, and flip the humiliation back onto his attacker. But the supreme man? The supreme man simply does not care. Not in the way weak men pretend not to care. Not in the way insecure men force a laugh and hope the moment passes. No, the supreme man does not care because the insult is completely meaningless to him. It does not register as an attack. It does not affect his reality. It does not even belong in his world. It is as if a child had thrown a handful of sand at him. Would he be offended? Would he feel humiliated? No, he would simply dust himself off and move forward, unchanged, undisturbed, untouched. This is true mastery. And yet, very few men ever reach this level. Why? Because most men are slaves to the opinions of others. They say they do not care what people think, but watch how quickly they react when insulted. Watch how desperately they try to reclaim their dignity when mocked. Their very reaction exposes the truth. They are still seeking validation. The supreme man has no need for this. He does not require validation because he has already validated himself. His self-worth is an internal creation, not something that can be given or taken away by external forces. And here's where true power is found. When a man no longer seeks validation, he becomes unknowable. His presence is enigmatic. People sense that he is different, but they cannot understand why. His mind operates on a level that they cannot reach, and this makes him untouchable. No one can humiliate a man who does not recognize humiliation as real. No one can insult a man who sees insults as meaningless noise. No one can embarrass a man who holds no fear of social opinion. This is why the greatest men in history have always been difficult to define. They are not reactive. They are not desperate to prove themselves. They are not playing the same petty social games as those around them. Look at Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled Rome, the greatest empire of its time, and yet moved through life with an almost eerie level of calm. His enemies tried to slander him. His rivals sought to humiliate him. And yet he wrote in his private journals, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Do you see? The humiliation only exists if you acknowledge it. There's a story of Diogenes, the ancient Greek philosopher, that reveals this truth perfectly. Diogenes was walking through a marketplace when a man began insulting him, shouting and mocking him in public. The crowd watched, waiting to see how he would respond. But Diogenes did not reply. He did not counter the insults. He did not engage in any way. Instead, he kept walking, as if nothing had happened, as if the words spoken to him had not even reached his mind. Because, in truth, they hadn't. The moment was nothing to him, less than nothing. And so the attacker, seeing that his insults had no effect, was left powerless. This is what you must train yourself to become. Not someone who fights against humiliation. Not someone who cleverly evades it, but someone who is so internally supreme that humiliation ceases to be a concept in his reality. You must become a man who is entirely self-contained, a man who is a universe unto himself, untouched by the noise of lesser minds. This is why true power is not loud, it is silent. The strongest men do not rush to defend themselves. They do not waste time trying to correct every insult, every false perception. They are too busy moving forward. The world will always be filled with fools. There will always be men who seek to bring others down, who gain their sense of worth from humiliating those around them. But you do not belong in that world, because you have transcended the entire game. From now on, when someone mocks you, I want you to see it for what it truly is. An insect buzzing at your feet, a weak man clawing for attention, a test that you have already passed. And when you see it this way, something miraculous happens. You do not react. You do not defend. You do not even acknowledge. You simply keep moving forward, unshaken, unstoppable, supreme. And in doing so, you become something that most men will never be. Truly untouchable. Now you are close to the final step. You have built a foundation of strength, of silence, of dominance, of internal supremacy. But there is still one last thing. The final piece, the ultimate weapon. And once you master it, you will not just avoid humiliation. You will become a force so powerful, so undeniable, that even your enemies will respect you in silence. Prepare yourself, because what comes next will change everything. Thing 6. The invincible presence. Becoming a force that commands respect without a word. There is a final level, a level so rare, so absolute, that the very idea of someone trying to humiliate you becomes unthinkable. Not because you deflect, not because you counter, not because you remain indifferent, but because your very presence makes it impossible. This is the ultimate power, the silent dominance that radiates from men who have become forces of nature. Imagine walking into a room and before you even speak, before anyone even thinks of testing you, there is an unspoken understanding. This is a man who cannot be touched. This is the essence of true power. Most men live their lives trying to protect themselves from humiliation. They train their minds to be strong, their words to be sharp, their posture to be unwavering. And while these things are important, they are still defensive measures. But there is something far beyond defense. There is an aura, an energy, a presence that commands respect without demanding it. A way of being so composed, so certain, so vast in internal strength that the very thought of attacking you feels ridiculous to those around you. How does one achieve this? It begins with a truth that few will ever understand. People do not perceive you based on what you say. They perceive you based on who you are. When a man walks into a room, he does not introduce himself with words. He introduces himself with his presence. His posture, his energy, the way he carries himself. All of these things communicate who he is before he even opens his mouth. And the most powerful men in history understood this. There was no need for Julius Caesar to constantly prove his dominance. There was no need for Marcus Aurelius to explain his wisdom. There was no need for Alexander the Great to boast of his strength. Their presence alone dictated reality. And if you cultivate this presence, you will find that humiliation, insults, and petty games will no longer be something you have to defend against, because they will simply cease to exist in your world. So how does a man cultivate this presence? It is not something that can be faked. It cannot be pretended, forced, or borrowed. It must be built from within, and it is built through absolute certainty in who you are. Most men seek validation because, deep down, they are uncertain. They do not know who they are, so they grasp at the opinions of others to form their identity. But the man with invincible presence has no such weakness. He knows himself completely. He does not wonder if he is strong. He knows. He does not seek approval. He knows his worth. He does not need to prove himself. He has already proven everything to himself. And this certainty is felt by everyone around him. When a man like this enters a room, people can sense something different. They do not know why, but they feel it. They feel the weight of his being, the depth of his mind, the unshakable presence of someone who has become himself fully. And in this presence there is no space for humiliation, because what fool would dare attempt to humiliate a force of nature? A storm does not argue with the wind. The ocean does not react to a single raindrop. The mountain does not tremble when a man shouts at its base. It simply is. And this is the final transformation. You are no longer someone who handles humiliation. You are no longer someone who defends against it. You are someone for whom humiliation is not even a concept in your world, because your very presence has made such an attempt impossible. This is why the greatest men do not need to fight for respect. Respect is simply given to them, not because they demand it, not because they argue for it, but because they are it. And now, so are you. You have moved beyond defense, beyond strategy, beyond reaction. You have become something that cannot be humiliated, not because you resist it, not because you counter it, but because your very being is untouchable. And from this moment forward, you will carry this with you. Walk into every room as if you belong there, because you do. Speak as if your words matter, because they do. Move through the world as if you are unstoppable, because you are. You have reached the highest level, the level where you no longer play by their rules, because you have become something beyond the game itself. And now, humiliation is no longer something you fear. It is something that no longer exists in your world, because you have transcended it entirely.